And today we are speaking to author Greg Parker from Australia. Hello, Greg.
Good morning, Len.
Your new book, Lee Harvey Oswald's Cold War, Why the Kennedy Assassination Should Be Reinvestigated, is really worthwhile. It's good. I've read it. I really enjoy it. I'm going through it a second time, and I'd like to help promote something like this. Yeah.
The evidence that they use to underpin the report just doesn't match up with the report. Simple as that.
First of all, do you have a website?
I do. It's called Reopen JFK Case. I have a website and a forum, which has basically grown over the last couple of years. I started researching and started finding things that people didn't seem to know about.
It starts off here, Lee Harvey Oswald's Cold War. How did you come about that title?
Basically, because I keep seeing the whole thing taken out of the context of the Cold War. I wanted to put it back in that context. There was just so much happening then, Len. It's just mind-blowing. The more research I do, I never cease to be amazed at the sort of stuff that was happening back then. And a lot of actions that happened around Lee fit into various CIA operations, various FBI operations.
Right, so you're making the case that he is a part of a cog of this effort of the U.S. to go against Soviet Union back then, and you followed his role, and when, he's needed, people in this Department of Defense know exactly where to find a guy like him.
It's a very complicated story with what I'm working on. I believe it all hinges on what came out of the Korean War, if I can put it that way. The POW situation was causing great consternation with the number of alleged defections there. And the communists were using a profiling system to identify potential defectors. And that profile ended up matching Lee Harvey Oswald to a T. And I believe that profile he was fitted with that profile in order to send him to the USSR to see if they would pick him up. The profile included things like coming from a single-parent family, having a high IQ but low prospects, things of that nature. And like I say, he fitted that profile, whether by design or otherwise. I think it was by design that happened.
Right, I was going to say, I don't doubt that there was even two sets of profiles for Lee Oswald. One, someone was supposed to find if they went digging through records, and one is his real records, but in the sheep dipping, I think that's what John Armstrong has come up against, that he's found these two sets of records. If not more, his conclusions maybe reach further than I would go. I still, read with interest because nothing, ceases to amaze me.
Yeah. With Oswald's profile, it was as much of what was left out of the profile that helped make the profile, if that makes sense at all. For instance, Edwin Ekdahl was never mentioned by Lee or his mother at Youth House, and yet he was a father figure to Lee, and that was part of the profile, having no father figure. And I believe that they had contact with Ekdahl in New York while they were living there. As I say in the book, I tried to make the case that Ekdahl most likely knew the Paynes from at least 1940 because of a common interest in the Socialist Party. There are a number of factors that lead me to believe that there are a whole network of people involved here. Ekdahl, Fred Korth, the Paynes. In the next volume, I'll be showing that Sylvia Hoke, Ruth Payne's sister, now it's common knowledge she was CIA, but actually we'll be showing what her job was within the CIA. I don't think that's ever been brought out before.
No, I know, and some of these names are new to people, new to the case, that they've got the Jack Ruby and the Lee Oswald and the Clay Shaw, Bannister. Some of these other names, you go a lot deeper into your research. Now, what really impressed me about your book was the fact that you started so far back before the crime. You started with this great story of United Fruit and Sullivan Cromwell and the Dulles brothers. You get that kind of ring of truth. And I was telling Jim DiEugenia, it reminded me of when I was reading Jim Douglas's book. It's just, this is how it happens. And it may be uncomfortable for some people. And are we being continually lied to by this multi-level media that just keeps saying, parroting, that Lee Oswald was the lone assassin and everyone go back to sleep?
I'm gratified to know that cut through. And that's the feedback I've been getting, is that stuff has meaning for people and they get it, which is, I'm just really grateful that people are getting that. The Gates Hand assassination, I just find it hard to believe that it's been ignored all these years, given that it's so like the RFK assassination. It's just a carbon copy.
Keyword here is patsy.
Yes.
They don't think twice when they have to have someone removed. And I think people may have been surprised that if opposition to their way of doing things came from even President Kennedy, they would just say, listen, okay, that guy's got to go. Call in our team. And, of course, people have speculated on who that is, but that's almost immaterial. So this is the catalyst then, that this items of history that you have found that were being misrepresented catalyzed you to decide you were going to write and put them in order for people to get a better idea of where this opposition to these people who want to work for their country for the better, and they're removed by you could make the case, well, the CIA, if they're not honoring their agreements to tell the truth, or they're ready to lie to Congress, you're thinking, who do they work for? Then the next question has to be, well, I guess they don't work for the American people. They're working for some kind of corporate structure, which is stateless, just wherever the best tax haven is. And they're tied into the military establishment of America. And when they get a call they need help, they flex their muscle. And if the agency can't do it, then they send in the Navy or the Marines. I mean, that was kind of written about by Smedley Butler.
Len, there was a time where I may have resisted an argument like that, but I'm constantly taken aback by just the lengths that the MICA and the CIA will go to in these matters. And everything is predicated on what's good for American business. That's the bottom line. Not what's good for the American people, what's good for American business. Because it's seen basically as the same thing anyway, or they fool themselves into thinking that.
Now, your book covers South America enough, I think, to hold the interest of anyone interested in this topic of the agency. And like I said, these corporations like United Fruit and Allen Dulles and these guys. Let's talk a little bit about China and New Orleans.
China, I went into China because Edwin Ekdahl had moved there, and he was there at an interesting time in history, at the same time as other people of interest to me, like John Dewey was also over there at the time. Dewey was a supporter of the Socialist Party. Ekdahl named his son after Dewey. Ekdahl was Edwin Ekdahl's son by his first marriage. Little things like that led me to believe that, okay, if he's a follower of Dewey and Dewey's a follower of the Socialist Party in America, then Edwin Ekdahl probably is too. And the more I looked into that, the more evidence I found for that. With the cooperative movements, Ekdahl and his sister were both into the cooperative movements, just as the Paynes were, just as the Socialist Party was. And he was actually living in New York at the same time as the Hyde clan were there. I don't know whether you're familiar with Ruth Payne's testimony, but she testified that her father had taken her as an 8-year-old to see Norman Thomas campaigns for the 1940 presidential elections. And as I say, by that time, Edwin Ekdahl was living in New York, probably a follower of Norman Thomas himself, and also into these cooperative movements, just as the Hyde clan were. I suspect that they probably knew each other.
When you start looking to all these people's backgrounds and Collins radio and all these kind of things, they're all interlinked.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. I mean, again, in the book I show that if you want to talk about linkages, the people that built and funded Youth House, where Oswald was incarcerated for a little while, that family had connections to the CIA, had connections to the Payne family, and none of that's been brought out in the past. I mean, this is all new information that's in the book, and it shows that there are these linkages. They are real. They all center, in this particular instance, at the center of it all is Marguerite and Lee Harvey Oswald as kids, as a young man.
This kind of thing has gone on with other people as well, not just Lee Oswald in a defector program, but other people that were sent over there, at the same time, similar time. It's not by accident that they were grooming this kind of, we need to send over, because of the Cold War, phony defectors. And we've got to make sure that we've got these kind of people in the pipeline. Who are we going to send next year and the year after?
Yeah. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the one that preceded Lee, I believe, was a Trojan horse for Lee. I believe he was used to allow Snyder, the consul over there, to use his discretion in how he handled potential defectors. Because what he did was refuse to take the renunciation, which basically he was legally obliged to do. And he used the excuse of the previous defector to do that with Lee. What that meant was that Lee never lost his US citizenship. It allowed him to come back, which allowed him to come home. If Snyder had done his job, he should have taken the renunciation there and then, and that would have been the end of the matter. There would have been no return for Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah, exactly. It's strange how Lee gets back into America just so nonchalant, casually. I've decided to come back.
Yeah, yeah, and as I pointed out in the book, that there was a precedent with Lee not saluting the flag at school. I mean, this was a period where there were several investigations happening of alleged communism within the school system in New York, and the whole system was being run on paranoia. Everyone was informing on everyone else. Yet here we have this kid who refuses to salute the flag in that situation, in that Cold War climate, in that very overheated climate of paranoia and everyone pointing fingers at everyone else. Not one question is asked about what sort of household Lee Harvey comes from that gives him the idea it's okay not to salute the flag. And then he goes over to the US, and again, he threatens to give radar secrets to the Soviets, and that's okay, no one cares. Neither of those situations make sense, Len. Neither of them.
Yeah, and then, making sense when you're talking about Lee meeting someone in this phony defector program, he ends up marrying Marina so quickly, and then you find out she'd been dating Robert Webster earlier, someone else in the defector program. I mean, you think, what are the odds of that? So
yeah,
it's like
just amazing how she got the two confused at one stage.
So both intelligence agencies are trying to play with each other, and whoever's setting up Lee thinks, well, we got the perfect patsy here. We got the perfect pigeon, because if this goes right, we're going to blame Castro, and we're going to fly him back there. We'll be able to invade the island, and plus Soviet Union won't be able to do a thing about it because we'll say he was their guy. So they'll have to shut up, and we'll only play that card if we have to.
Yeah. In that regard, he was the perfect choice for the role he played.
And I think your kind of work, it exposes, this first book doesn't go into it like others have, but, the Chicago plot and how there were other guys in there in the pipeline that maybe figured out that they were being used. And I'm talking about maybe Richard K. Snagel, right? And other people saying, wait a minute, something's up here, where Lee may have just been thinking, well, I'm going to be working in intelligence now, so I'll just do what they tell me. And if I get arrested, I've been arrested before, and I guess I'll be interviewed. And so he was being groomed or sheep-dipped for whatever operation he thought he was going into next. But the thing is, we keep coming back to then, the Warren Commission is a complete fabrication of the facts. And if you are, as an interested citizen, want to know what are the actual facts of the history of some event, you're not going to find them with the McAdamses, and that you're going to take honest research to say, here's what we have discovered. And this, books like yours, this is what I'm interested in. The real history and the background when you bring in Sullivan Cromwell, United Fruit, the big money behind the Department of Defense, Bank of Boston. Who are these guys? And this is where you find the real roots of the crime, where in a businessman's meeting they say, this guy's got to go. And like you have brought out, well, it's been done before, and here's how they did it before. So it's not something brand new. What are we going to do? It's like, we know exactly what to do.
It's you touch on how other authors have brought out other plots, Chicago, Miami, whatever, and how I'm not covering that. Well, you're right, Len, I'm not, and whether I will or not, it'll be.
I didn't mean anything by that.
I know you didn't mean anything. I'm just trying to explain what I'm about. All that stuff's been covered and covered very well. I'm staying clear of, or as clear as I can, of retracing other people's steps. I'm trying to add substance to what's already been done. Everyone keeps saying there's nothing more to learn. I'm trying to show that's not true. There is a lot more to learn. And I'm putting together as much new information as I can into that mix.
And what is good, as well as Jim Douglas's book, JFK the Unspeakable, you get a bigger picture. You get this far expanded view of not just what happened in Dallas, but the real antecedent, just the background to this kind of stuff. If big corporate, the one percenters, would send in the army to mow guys down with machine guns, they'd think nothing about shooting one guy.
Exactly right, Len, yeah. Yeah, the big picture is important, and I'm trying to cover both, the micro and the macro.
So let's talk about that, micro. What was one big thing that you didn't know about before writing the book? What's just something that comes to mind that you say, well, in my investigation, I was really surprised about
Okay. This won't come out until volume 3, and I don't know whether you're aware of this particular person, but there was a barber in Irving who testified. His name was Shastine, was his surname. He testified that Lee Harvey Oswald had attended for haircuts over a period of time, and he was with a youth of an age about 14 who at one stage started talking about communism, etc., etc. I have discovered who that person is, and I'll be revealing who that was, and he's a well-known figure.
Okay, that's coming out in volume 3.
Volume 3, yeah. I'll name the kid at the barber shop that caused so much concern to the barbers. Like I say, his name that will be familiar, not through the assassination, through other areas of his life. He's a well-known figure. He was just a kid at the time, at 14, 15. I believe he was playing a role. He was helping to paint Lee Harvey Oswald as a communist. Shastine was, by the way, was an FBI informant, and I believe he was chosen for that reason, that you go in and you say all this stuff there, and he's going to go to the FBI because he is an informant. So that helps paint Lee in the records as a communist in the lead up to the assassination.
What's something else then that you can tell us about in volume 1 that you discovered?
In volume 1, well, the stuff about Youth House is what. See, I decided to look into Youth House and do a history on it, and that's where I found out about the family that basically funded it and what their connections were. I mean, they owned several department stores, one of which employed the wife of George Hunter White. Another member of the same family started a publishing firm. He was the publisher of E. Howard Hunt. And another one had a holiday house at National Island where the Paynes also holidayed. And these are all people behind Youth House.
Now, this is the kind of in-depth background that we haven't seen too much. And, John Armstrong is the only guy, I think, that wrote about some of these very early instances, scenarios in Lee Oswald's life. Yet, I think, due to people backing up your research, you seem to be correcting him and actually even clarifying more the real record, which is great. And your book is very affordable, where John's was like $100 or more if you could get it, right?
Yeah, well, I understand he spent a lot of money in writing that book, so I don't begrudge him that.
No, years, and he could only get it printed outside of America, and it was this limited run that there they were. But, I mean, I did some interviews with them, and that's available. But like I'm saying, these kind of things, this isn't really for people brand new to the case. This is for kind of someone who knows who's who. Just to be talking about some of these topics is very in-depth. But, I mean, hats off to you,
Yeah, thank you, Len. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we're kind of, I don't want to give away too much of the book, and yet I don't know what more to extract from you, about the reasons for writing and where the research is. Lee Harvey Oswald's Cold War. So this is definitely a product of the Cold War and big business and the changing of a government by gunfire. The more and more evidence leads to, it doesn't, we don't find more books coming out. We have found more evidence on Lee Oswald, and this explains it further. This is why he did it, his motives and all that, and this explains the timeline, how he got from here to there. No, nothing like that happens. Just the more research that's done exposes the failing of every one of these implausible scenarios that the Warren Commission tried to pull the wool over your eyes kind of thing, where they said, well, we'll just print the report and people won't ever read it, and that'll be that.
Those were Dulles' words, weren't they? He didn't think anyone would read it. So.
And then the next flag would be, well, we're not going to make our research available for 75 years. I mean, I don't care what the topic was. I mean, if you say you've got to hide your findings for 75 years, the first thing you think is, what is so damning that you've got to hide them, that we won't be alive to complain about your actual fraud? So summing up on this volume 1, what would you like to leave listeners with?
The basis of where it was heading was that Lee was, and I think this is one thing that Armstrong did get right, that Lee was identified in New York as a kid that they could use in the future, in whatever way, and it sort of goes from there. And I think I've gone some way to identifying the people around there that were doing that. George Hunter White, Edwin Ekdal, Fred Korth. Those are names that you're going to be hearing more of in future volumes.
this is, like you're mentioning, part of the Cold War itself,
Yeah.
not a lone Marxist.
Yeah, and I mean, the three volumes will come together nicely. I mean, if there appears to be any loose ends in the first volume, it will all start to make better and better sense as it goes on. By the third volume, there is one piece of information that will tie everything together neatly, and that is a key figure in the administration who was an LBJ man, was actually related to a key witness against Oswald. Now, that's never come out before. I've had two genealogists look into it and confirm my suspicions that they were related.
Well, to seasoned researchers, this is all interesting information. So this is, something we're looking forward to. The first Volume 1, Lee Harvey Oswald's Cold War, Why the Kennedy Assassination Should Be Reinvestigated. Okay, Greg, thanks so much for spending time then. Lee Harvey Oswald's Cold War. I urge everyone to pick up a copy. It's very inexpensive, and it's on Kindle. We've got Volume 2 and Volume 3 to come. I'm sure we'll talk to you about that when they're ready.
Terrific, Len. Thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. I always just
Talk to you
like
again.
I like to help support good research, good honest work. So thank you, Greg.
Okay. Bye-bye, Len.
Okay.